Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Chris. Sometimes life teaches you lessons in ways you'd never expect, and mine came wrapped in disrespect, betrayal, and a legal surprise that changed everything. I'm calm now, because I've had time to sit with it, think through it, and accept what happened. But when it was happening, trust me, it wasn't easy. After being married to my wife for years and having 2 kids, I can't point to one single moment when everything fell apart. It happened slowly, little by little, until one day I realized I didn't recognize the woman I was living with anymore. Our home used to be a place where we could talk about anything. But somewhere along the line, those conversations stopped being calm and easy. Every small discussion turned into a disagreement, and every disagreement turned into a fight. At some point, I was afraid to say the wrong thing because I knew it would end with raised voices and hurtful words. What made it worse was how comfortable she became with disrespecting me. After a while, I stopped talking as much, because what was the point of sharing anything when the person you're sharing it with treats your thoughts like a joke? I went from being her partner to being someone she spoke to only when she needed something. And when she didn't need anything, she acted like having me around was an inconvenience. Even though she never admitted it, I could tell something deeper was going on. There were signs any man in love wouldn't want to believe at first. She was coming home late, going out more, staying out longer, and becoming defensive over the smallest questions, like asking where she had been. Her whole attitude changed. She went from warm to cold, from open to closed off, and from caring to indifferent. I tried to understand it, but the more I tried, the more distant she became. A part of me suspected she might be seeing someone else, but I didn't have proof. All I had was a feeling, wondering if I was losing my mind or if my instincts were trying to warn me. I didn't want to accuse her without evidence, and I didn't want to become the paranoid husband who checked her phone or followed her around. But the doubt was there, growing a little more every day. After my last kid moved out, the emotional tension in the house became unbearable. I would wake up exhausted from all-night thinking, and I would go to bed drained because the day felt like a silent battle. Home stopped feeling peaceful. It seemed more like a place where I was constantly judged, ignored, or blamed for things I hadn't done. Even simple activities like sitting down to eat or watching TV felt heavy. It was as if the air in the house had changed, and no matter how deeply I breathed, I could never relax. Eventually, I realized I had to choose between staying in that toxic environment or protecting my sanity. I told myself that leaving didn't mean I was giving up on the marriage. It meant I was giving myself space to think, to breathe, and to stop drowning in stress every single day. So I packed a few things and moved out. It wasn't an angry exit, but a quiet decision made by a man who was tired of fighting a battle he didn't fully understand. I didn't leave because I stopped loving her. I left because staying was starting to destroy me from the inside. When I moved out, I felt a kind of relief, but it wasn't the complete freedom I expected. Yes, I finally had space to breathe, and the constant arguments were no longer happening right in front of me. But mentally, nothing had settled. I would catch myself trying to figure out where things went wrong. Even though I wasn't living with her anymore, she still occupied the back of my mind. She was still my wife on paper. My work schedule didn't help either. I was juggling long hours, important deadlines, and constant responsibilities. I didn't have the time or the energy to follow her around or keep tabs on her daily movements, even if I wanted to. And honestly, part of me felt embarrassed even thinking about doing that. I didn't want to turn into a man who stalked his own wife. But at the same time, I needed answers. I needed to know whether I had walked away from a painful situation or if I had walked away from a lie that had been running for months. That was the moment I decided to hire a private investigator. I struggled with it, but finally accepted that it was the only way to discover the truth without sacrificing more of my peace. I didn't want to keep guessing or wondering if I had been overreacting. When I met the investigator, I didn't have much to give him at first, just her usual schedule, the places she liked to go, her routines, and the names of the people she spent time with regularly. He took notes carefully, asked a few questions, and told me he would handle the rest. After that meeting, all I could do was wait, And I quickly realized that waiting for the truth can be more stressful than hearing it. Every day felt longer than the last, but at least I knew I was getting closer to finally understanding what had been happening behind my back. When the private investigator finally called me to say he had completed the job, I remember feeling a strange mix of fear and relief. Part of me hoped he wouldn't find anything, because that would mean our problems were fixable and maybe I had been overthinking everything. But another part of me, the part that had grown tired of guessing and wondering, just wanted the truth, whatever it was. When we sat down, and he opened his folder, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. It wasn't one man. It was two. Two different men who had been sharing pieces of my wife's life behind my back. The first one was a close family friend. This was someone I had trusted, someone who had been in our home so often that he practically knew our routines. He had eaten at our table, joked with my kids, and even offered me advice during challenging moments in my marriage. To see pictures of him with my wife, standing too close to her in places they had no business being together, felt like someone had punched me in the chest. It wasn't just betrayal. It was disrespect in the deepest form. He played the role of a supportive friend in front of me while sneaking around with her behind the scenes. That kind of double life leaves a bitter taste you can't describe unless you've lived it. The second man surprised me even more because he wasn't someone I knew personally at the time. The investigator had tracked their meetings, captured photos of the meeting. I didn't realize then that this same man would eventually show up at my workplace months later to represent her professionally. Seeing that his involvement with her began long before he ever stepped into my office added another layer of betrayal I wasn't ready for. The PI didn't just dump the information on me. He laid everything out in order, showing me dates, times, locations, and receipts where applicable. It was like watching a puzzle being completed piece by piece, except the final picture made my stomach twist. Every slight doubt I had ignored suddenly made sense. Every argument, every sudden mood change, every night she claimed she needed space, it all lined up with the evidence in front of me. The marriage I had been trying to save was already gone long before I moved out. I wasn't grieving a real relationship anymore. I was grieving the idea of one. As painful as it was, there was a strange sense of calm that came with finally knowing. It didn't fix anything, and it didn't make the betrayal easier to swallow, but at least the lies were done. I no longer had to guess or doubt myself. For the first time in a long time, things were painfully apparent. When I finally came to terms with the lies and the disrespect, filing for divorce felt like the only reasonable next step. I thought it would be easy to file for it on my own. So I sat down one evening, opened my laptop, and started the process. I completed the basic forms, provided the requested information, and created a checklist of documents I needed to submit. One of those documents was a certified copy of our marriage certificate. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it would be a simple, routine request. The next morning, I went to the state registrar's office during my lunch break. I gave the clerk our names, wedding date, and the county where we got married. She typed everything into her system while I stood there waiting, rehearsing in my mind how the rest of the divorce paperwork would go. I expected her to print the certificate and hand it to me just like that. But instead, she frowned at the screen and asked me to repeat the details. I did. She typed again, slower this time. Still, nothing appeared. She told me she couldn't find any record of our marriage. At first, I wasn't worried. Offices make mistakes all the time. Maybe it was spelled wrong, or perhaps the documents hadn't been fully digitized from the older system. She checked again. Still nothing. She called over another employee. They searched another database. Nothing. I started feeling uneasy. The clerk suggested I contact the county where the wedding took place, since the paperwork sometimes stays at the county level before being transferred to the state. I thanked her and left. What was supposed to be a simple errand was now turning into a full investigation. When I contacted the county clerk, I explained the situation and provided all the details. They asked for time to verify the records manually, so I waited for their call. Later that afternoon, they phoned me and said they still couldn't find anything. That was the moment I felt the first real shock. I asked them to check again, thinking the original paperwork might have been filed under the officiant's name instead of ours. They checked. Then they checked a second time. Then they checked a third time. Finally, the woman on the phone let out a small sigh and plainly told me, "Sir, we have no record of your marriage. It was never filed." I sat there in silence, wondering how that could be. We had trusted our officiant when he said he would handle everything. He had smiled, shaken my hand, and told us he would file it first thing Monday morning. We believed him. We never asked questions. We never followed up. And as it turns out, he never filed anything. According to the law, if the certificate isn't filed, the marriage isn't legally recognized. In the eyes of the state, we were nothing but two people who had a ceremony and went home. The county clerk prepared and sent a notarized document confirming that no marriage was registered under our names. When I held that paper in my hands, everything inside me went still. All the years of disrespect, all the arguments, all the entitlement she carried like a crown, all the times she threatened to ruin me if we ever divorced. And here I was, looking at undeniable proof that the marriage she had used as a weapon didn't legally exist at all. How I felt was something I still can't fully explain. When I discovered everything, I felt something inside me settle. It was a calm awareness that I didn't need to rush or confront anyone. So instead of storming into my wife's house or sending her the documents right away, I decided to stay silent, to breathe, to think clearly, and to choose my moves without emotion clouding my judgment. During those days and weeks, I went about my life as if nothing unusual had happened. I spoke to my children the same way I always did, checking in on them, keeping our bond steady, and never dragging them into the problems between their mother and me. On the outside, everything looked normal. But inside, I knew the entire situation was very different from what my wife believed. She thought she was in control, that her secrets were well hidden, and that she could do things on her own terms. She didn't know how empty she was. Knowing she cheated with her lawyer and a family friend made it easier for me to stay calm. The betrayal was painful, but once I saw the evidence, there was no more guessing or confusion. It was like watching the final piece of a puzzle fall into place. Learning that our marriage wasn't even legally recognized gave me a strange sense of freedom. I didn't need to argue with her. I didn't need to defend myself. I didn't need to match her anger. I just needed to wait. For once, time was on my side. So I let her believe her version of the story, knowing the moment would come when all the facts I had gathered would speak for themselves. And when that moment arrived, the impact would be much greater than anything I could have said in anger. Months later, I was at work trying to focus on my tasks for the day when one of the receptionists called to let me know someone was asking for me in the lobby. I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was a client who had come without an appointment. But the moment I stepped out and saw the man my wife had been cheating with, he introduced himself as my wife's lawyer. I knew exactly why he had come, from the way he believed he had complete control over whatever was about to happen. He followed me to my office, and I could see by the way he walked that he had rehearsed this moment in his head. Once we got inside, he simply placed the envelope he was holding on my desk and said he was there to serve me divorce papers. Then he went into a long speech, talking as if he were giving some victory announcement. According to him, my wife would be getting everything: the house, the assets, and even full custody. He said it as if he expected me to start shaking. I remember staring at him, trying to understand why he was so confident. Our children were full-grown adults, living their own lives. There was no custody to fight over, but he brought it up anyway. Maybe because he wanted to make the moment sting. Then he added a comment that wasn't necessary at all, saying my kids didn't want my name anymore. It was the kind of comment meant to hurt a man as deeply as possible. But the truth is, instead of feeling angry or scared, I felt strangely calm. As I listened to him brag and exaggerate, all I could think about was how clueless he was. He had no idea that every word coming out of his mouth was built on a lie they told themselves about what they thought they could take from me. None of what he said mattered, because none of it was legally possible. They were so sure our marriage was real on paper that they didn't even bother to look before coming after me like predators who had already cornered their prey. So I let him finish, then gave him a simple smile. He left my office thinking he had delivered a heavy blow, but the truth was, he walked out looking more foolish than victorious. Once the door closed behind him, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I went home later that day and pulled out everything I had kept tucked away: the notarized document from the county clerk, the PI's files, and the photographs that showed the truth she believed would never surface. I chose each document with intention. The notarized letter came first. It was a straightforward confirmation that the officiant we trusted all those years ago never filed the paperwork. After that, I moved to the folder containing the private investigator's findings. I didn't include everything. I wasn't trying to embarrass her. I just wanted her to see enough to understand that I knew the whole truth. I selected the pieces that made the situation impossible to deny. I wanted the truth to speak for itself, without me adding a single word. Then I slid these files into a large envelope, sealed it, and wrote her name on the front. I didn't send it through the mail either. Instead, I sent it back to the same lawyer who had walked into my workplace trying to intimidate me. The instruction was, deliver this to your client. He didn't suspect anything. He probably thought it was a response to the divorce papers he had served. I knew that once she opened it, both her confidence and her plans would fall apart instantly. She had walked around believing she had control, thinking she would win financially and emotionally. She never imagined that the truth, her infidelity, and the missing marriage record would be the one thing she couldn't fight or twist. And I didn't need to raise my voice or argue to make that happen. All I had to do was let the truth reach her doorstep. When evening came, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Call after call, message after message. At first, I ignored them because I already knew what had reached her hands. But when the calls kept coming nonstop, I finally picked up. The moment I said hello, all I heard was crying. Her words came out broken, and the first thing she managed to say was, "How could you keep such a secret for 25 years?" She wasn't asking because she wanted an explanation. She was accusing me, trying to make this collapse my fault. I stayed quiet for a few seconds because the question didn't even make sense. Then I calmly told her the truth. I had only discovered everything recently when I was preparing to file for divorce myself. I explained that I didn't hide anything from her for 25 years. It was the officiant who failed to file our marriage papers, and that mistake had followed us without either of us knowing. But even as I explained all of that, I could tell she wasn't crying because of the marriage certificate. She was crying because everything she had planned had disappeared in one moment. She wasn't just shocked. She was scared, embarrassed, and suddenly powerless. I still haven't decided what to do with the house we bought together that I left. Days after that call, she tried to shift the focus to our children. She started reaching out to them, trying to get ahead of the story before I spoke to them. She told them I was manipulative, that I was trying to trick her, and that I had set her up. She called me selfish, cold, and even dangerous. But what she didn't expect was that our children weren't little kids anymore. They were adults who could think for themselves. When they heard her side of the story, they didn't rush to pick a team. Instead, they came to me calmly and asked to see the facts. They wanted anything that could help them understand what was really happening. And when I showed them what I had, they didn't react with anger or shouting. They processed everything quietly, then went back to ask their mother the same questions. That was when the cracks in her story started to show. She couldn't keep her story consistent because it was built on panic and lies. She gave them one explanation today and another tomorrow. She said things that didn't match what they remembered from growing up. She tried to portray herself as the victim, but her claims didn't align with the facts or their experiences. The more they listened to her, the more they realized she wasn't being truthful. She was trying to hide the embarrassment of being caught cheating and the shock of discovering the marriage wasn't even legal. In her effort to make me look like the villain, she ended up revealing her own guilt. And just like that, the more she pushed her version of the story, the more the kids distanced themselves from her. They didn't cut her off, but they stopped accepting everything she said at face value. They wanted honesty, not emotional manipulation, and unfortunately for her, she didn't have any honesty left to give. Looking back on everything that happened, I sometimes sit quietly and try to make sense of how my life ended up taking this kind of turn. There's still a few things I haven't fully figured out, especially regarding the house we bought with both our names on the documents. Even though our marriage wasn't legally registered, the house is still a real asset we purchased together, which means we both have legal claims to it. I'm taking my time to understand the right steps, not because I'm afraid of a fight, but because I want to handle things properly. I'm not the type of person who rushes into decisions fueled by anger. And even now, I still think carefully before making moves that will affect both of us and our children. When I tell this story, people I know assume I planned everything from the beginning. To them, it's like I waited for the perfect moment to strike back. But that's not true. I didn't plan revenge. I was hurt, sure, but I wasn't interested in destroying her life. What mattered to me was the truth, and once I had the truth in my hands, I realized I didn't need to shout or try to embarrass her. I didn't need to compete with her lies or match her disrespect. Peace didn't come from winning. It came from choosing to let go of a situation that had drained me for years. It came from finally accepting that the marriage I thought I had was long gone, and it was time for me to move forward without dragging the past with me. One thing I've learned through all this is that silence can be powerful. When you know the truth, you don't have to argue or defend yourself endlessly. The truth speaks for you when the time is right. That's precisely what happened in my situation. Every lie, every hidden action, every arrogant assumption, all of it eventually came to light without me having to lift a finger. Sometimes life reveals what needs to be revealed, and all you have to do is step back and let things unfold. And even now, I'm not going all out to destroy her, because at the end of the day, we share children. No matter how badly things ended between us, I still want our kids to have some sense of balance. I don't want them to feel like they're stuck between two enemies. But let me be clear, just because I'm not attacking her doesn't mean I'm going to sit back and lose everything. I may stay calm, but I'm not foolish. I will definitely secure my share of the house and any other assets that legally belong to me. Walking away peacefully doesn't mean walking away empty-handed. It simply means choosing a path that protects my peace without ignoring my rights. If there's anything I want people to take from my story, it's this. Sometimes the truth takes its time, but when it finally arrives, it changes everything. And when it does, you don't need revenge. You just need the courage to let go and move forward. But to teach the lawyer a lesson, I reported his affair with my wife to the law firm he worked for. I didn't shout at him, and I didn't threaten him. I simply collected the evidence I had, put together in a clear folder, and walked into his firm like someone handling regular business. I asked to speak with the managing partner, and when I was brought into the office, I explained calmly that one of their lawyers had crossed a line that no professional should ever cross. I showed them the photos, the dates, the messages, and the proof from the private investigator. I just stated the facts and handed everything over. After I left the building, I didn't bother following up to know what happened to him. I wasn't interested in the details of whatever punishment he faced. But from the look on the managing partner's face and the way they immediately told me they would handle it internally, I knew this wasn't going to be a minor issue for him. Sleeping with a client is one of the biggest professional mistakes a lawyer can make. It can destroy careers, cost someone their license, and leave a permanent stain on their record. So while I may not know exactly how they dealt with him, I'm sure he got into serious trouble. And honestly, that was enough for me. I just wanted the truth to catch up with him the same way it caught up with my wife. Now, let me throw the question back to you. What do you think? If you were in my shoes, would you have done precisely what I did, or would you have taken things further?